Hi guys, it's Navya. We're gonna continue reading Northanger Abbey. So I guess you've noticed in the past videos I've been doing just one chapter at once. But I think from now on I'm gonna read 2 chapters at once since the chapters in this book are pretty small. And I don't want to spend too many videos finishing up the book, so in this video we're gonna read chapters 6 and 7. So just as a recap, in the last chapter, I suggest you watch the earlier chapters of the book, starting from chapter 1 if you haven't seen this Northanger Abbey yet. So just to recap, we've met Catherine Morland, the heroine of the book, and she's traveling to Bath to make her debut into Royal Society. So all along her fear was, oh dear, I don't have any friend here, what am I gonna do? But the good news is Mrs. Allen, who's her chaperone, has met one of her old family friends, and her and Mrs. Thorpe, who's the daughter of Mrs. Allen's family friend, are getting well acquainted. So now Catherine's enjoying herself in Bath, and we're gonna see more of this in this chapter. Chapter 6. Okay, I'll start now. The following conversation, which took place between the two friends in the pump room one morning, after an acquaintance of 8 or 9 days, is given as a specimen of their very warm attachment, and of the delicacy, discretion, originality of thought, and literary taste which marked the reasonableness of that attachment. They met by appointment, and as Isabella had arrived nearly 5 minutes before her first address naturally was, "My dearest creature, what can have made you so late? I have been waiting for you at least this age." "Have you, indeed? I am very sorry for it. But I really thought I was in very good time. It is but just 1. I hope you have not been here long?" "Oh, these 10 ages at least. I am sure I have been down here for half an hour. But now let us go and sit down at the other end of the room and enjoy yourselves. I have 100 things to say to you. In the first place, I was so afraid it would rain this morning, just as I wanted to set off. It looked very showery, and that would have thrown me into agonies. Did you know I saw the prettiest hat you can imagine in a shop window in Milsom Street just now? Very like yours, only with coquillote ribbons instead of green. I quite longed for it. But my dearest Catherine, what have you been doing with yourself all morning? Have you gone on with Adolfo?" Adolfo is just the name of a novel. "Yes, I have been reading it ever since I woke, and I am got to the Black Veil." "Are you indeed? How delightful! Oh, I would not tell you what is behind the Black Veil for the world. Are you not wild to know?" "Oh, yes, quite. What can it be? But do not tell me. I would not be told upon any account." "I know it must be a skeleton. I'm sure it is Laurentina's skeleton. Oh, I am glad with the book. I should like to spend my whole life in reading it, I assure you. If it had not been to meet you, I would not have come away from it." Sorry about that. If it had not been to meet you, I would have not come away from it for all the world. Dear creature, how much I am obliged to you. When you have finished Adolfo, we will read the Italian together. Sorry, I lost the page. Okay, I'm back. We will read the Italian together, and I've made a list of 10 or 12 more of the same kind for you. Have you indeed? How glad I am. What are they all? I will read you their names directly. Here are they in my pocket book. Castle of Wolfenbach, Claremont, Mysterious Warnings, Necromancer of the Black Forest, Midnight Bell, Orphan of the Rhine, and Horrid Mysteries. Those will last us some time. Yes, pretty well. But are they all horrid? Are you sure they're all horrid? Yes, quite sure, for a particular friend of mine, a Miss Andrews, a sweet girl, one of the sweetest creatures in the world, has read every one of them. I wish you knew Miss Andrews. You would be delighted by her. She is netting herself out the sweetest cloak you can conceive. I think her as beautiful as an angel, and I am so vexed with the men for not admiring her. I scold them all amazingly about it." "Scold them? Do you scold them for not admiring her? Yes, that I do. There's nothing I would not do for those who are really my friends. I have no notion of loving people by halves. It is not my nature. My attachments are always excessively strong. I told Captain Hunt at one of the assemblies this winter that if he was to tease me all night, I would not dance with him, unless he would allow Miss Andrews to be as beautiful as an angel. The men think us incapable of real friendship, you know, and I'm determined to show them the difference. Now, if I were to hear anybody speak slightingly of you, I should fire up in the moment. But that is not all likely, for you are just the kind of girl to be a great favorite with the men. Oh dear, cried Catherine, coloring. How could you say so? I know you very well. You have so much animation, which is exactly what Miss Andrews wants, for I must confess there is something amazingly insipid about her. Oh, I must tell you that just after we parted yesterday, I saw a young man looking at you so earnestly. I'm sure he is in love with you. Catherine colored and exclaimed again. Isabella laughed. It is very true upon my honor, but I see how it is. You are indifferent to everybody's admiration except that of one gentleman, who shall be nameless. Nay, I cannot blame you. Speaking more seriously, your feelings are easily understood. Where the heart is really attached, I know very well how little one can be pleased with the attention of anybody else. Everything is so insipid, so uninteresting, that doesn't relate to the beloved object. I can perfectly comprehend your feelings. But you should not persuade me that I think so very much of Mr. Tilney, for perhaps I may never see him again. Never not see him again? My dearest creature, do not talk about it. I am sure you would be miserable if you thought so. No, indeed, I should not. I do not pretend to say that I was not very much pleased with him, that while I have a duel-foe to read, I feel if nobody could make me miserable. Oh, the dreadful black veil! My dear Isabella, I'm sure there must be Florentina skeleton behind it. It is so odd of me that you should have never read Adolfo before, but I suppose Mrs. Morland objects to novels. No, she does not. She very often reads Sir Charles Grandison herself. The new books do not fall in our way. Sir Charles Grandison? That is an amazing horrid book, is it not? I remember Miss Andrews could not get through the first volume. It is not like Godolphin at all, but yet I think it is very entertaining. Do you indeed? You surprise me. I thought it had not been readable. But my dearest Catherine, have you settled what to wear in your head tonight? Sorry for yawning so much. I'm a little tired. I am determined, at all events, to be dressed exactly like you. The men take notice of that sometimes, you know. But it does not signify if they do, said Catherine, very innocently. Signify? Oh, heavens! I make it a rule never to mind what they say. They are very often amazingly impertinent, if you do not treat them with spirit, and make them keep their distance. Aren't they? Well, I never observed that. They always behave very well to me. Oh, they give themselves such airs. They're the most conceited creatures in the world, and they think themselves of so much importance. By and by, though I have thought of it 100 times, I have always forgot to ask you what is your favorite complexion in a man. Do you like them best dark or fair? I hardly know. I never much thought about it. Something between both, I think. Brown, not fair, not very dark. Very well, Catherine, that is exactly he. I forgot your description of Mr. Tilney. A brown skin with dark eyes, or rather dark hair. While my taste is different, I prefer light eyes, and as to my complexion, do you know I like a sallow better than any other? You must not betray me if you should ever meet with one of your acquaintance answering that description. Betray you? What do you mean? Nay, do not distress me. I believe I have asked too much. Let us drop the subject. Catherine, in some amazement, complied, and after remaining a few moments silent, was on the point of reverting to what interested her at the time rather than more than anything else in the world. Florentina skeleton? but her friend prevented her by saying, "For heaven's sake, let us move away from this end of the room. Do you know, there are two odious young men who have been staring at me this half-hour? They really put me quite out of countenance. Let us go and look at their arrivals. They will hardly follow us there." Away they walked to the book, and while Isabella examined the names, it was Catherine's employment to watch the proceedings of those alarming young men. "They're not coming this way, are they? I hope they are not so impertinent as to follow us. Pray let me know if they are coming. I am determined I will not look up." In a few moments, Catherine, with unaffected pleasure, assured her that she need no longer be easy, as the gentlemen had just left the pump-room. "And which way are they gone?" said Isabella, turning hastily around. One was a very good-looking man. "They went towards the churchyard." "Well, I'm amazingly glad I've gotten rid of them. And now, what say you going to Edgar's Buildings with me and looking at my new hat? You said you should like to see me in it." Catherine readily agreed. "Only," she added, "perhaps we may overtake these two young men." "Oh, never mind that. If we make haste, we shall pass by them presently, and I am dying to show you my hat. But if we only wait a few minutes, there will be no danger of our seeing them at all." "I shall not pay them any such compliment, I assure you. I have no notion of treating men with such respect. That is the only way to spoil them." Catherine had nothing to oppose against such reasoning, and therefore, to show the independence of Miss Thorpe, her resolution of humbling the sex, they set off immediately as fast as they could and walk, in pursuit of the two young men. Okay. Okay. Chapter 7 now. Half a minute conducted them through the pump yard to the archway, opposite Union Passage, but here they were stopped. Everyone acquainted with Bath may remember the difficulties of crossing Cheap Street at this point. It is indeed a street of so impertinent a nature, so unfortunately connected with the great London and Oxford roads, and the principal inn of the city, that a day never passes in which parties of ladies, however important their business, whether in quest of pastry, millinery, or even, as in the present case of young men, are not detained on one side or other by carriages, horsemen, or carts. This evil had been felt and lamented at least 3 times a day by Isabella since her residence at Bath, and she was now fated to feel and lament it once more. For at the very moment of coming opposite to the Union Passage, and within the view of the two gentlemen who are proceeding through the crowds, and threading the gutters of that interesting alley, they are prevented crossing by the approach of a gig, driven along on the bad pavement by a most knowing-looking coachman, with all the vehemence that could most fitly endanger the lives of himself, his companion, and his horse. "Oh, these odious gigs," said Isabella, looking up. "How I detest them!" But this detestation, though so just, was of short duration, for she looked again and exclaimed, "Delightful! Mr. Morland and my brother!" "Good heaven! It's James!" was uttered at the same moment by Catherine, and on catching the young man's eyes, the horse was immediately checked with violence, which almost threw him on his haunches, and the servant, having now scampered up, the gentleman jumped out, and the equipage was delivered to his care. Catherine, by whom this meeting was wholly unexpected, received her brother with the liveliest pleasure, and he, being of a very amiable disposition, and sincerely attached to her, gave every proof on his side of equal satisfaction, which he could have the leisure to do while the brides of Miss Thorpe were incessantly challenging to his notice. And to her his devoirs were speedily paid, with a mixture of joy and embarrassment which might have informed Catherine, had she been more expert in the development of other people's feelings, and less simply engrossed in her own, that her brother thought her friend quite as pretty as she could do herself. John Thorpe, who in the meantime had been giving orders about the horses, soon joined them. And from him she directly received the amends which were her due, for while he slightly and carelessly touched the hand of Isabella, on her he bestowed a whole scrape and a half of her short bow. He was a stout young man, of middling height, who, with a plain face and ungraceful form, seemed fearful of being too handsome unless he wore the dress of a groom, and too much like a gentleman unless he were easy where he ought to be civil, and impudent where he might be allowed to be easy. He took out his watch. "How long do you think we have been running it from Tetbury, Miss Morland?" "I do not know the distance." Her brother told her it was 23 miles. "23!" cried Thorpe. 25 if it's an inch," Morland remonstrated, pleaded the authority of road books, innkeepers, and milestones. But his friend disregarded them all. He had a surer test of distance. "I know it must be 25, said he, "by the time we have been doing it. It is now 1:30. We drove out of the inn-yard at Tetbury as the town clock struck 11, and I defy any man in England to make my horse go less than 10 miles an hour in harness. That makes it exactly 25. You have lost an hour," said Miss Morland. "It was only 10 o'clock when we came from Tetbury." 10 o'clock! It was 11, upon my soul. I counted every stroke. This brother of yours would persuade me out of my senses, Miss Morland. Do but look at my horse. Did you ever see an animal so made for speed in your life?" The servant had just mounted the carriage and was driving off. Such true blood! 3 hours and a half indeed, coming only 23 miles. Look at that creature, and suppose it possible if you can. He does look very hot, to be sure. Hot? He had not turned a hair till we came to Walcot Church. But look at his forehead, look at his loins. Only see how he moves. A horse cannot go less than 10 miles an hour. Tie his legs and he will get on. What do you think of my gig, Miss Morland? A neat one, is it not? Well hung, town built. I had not had it in a month. It was built for a Christchurch man, a friend of mine, a very good sort of fellow. He ran it a few weeks till I believe it was convenient to have done with it. I happened just then to be looking out for some light thing of the kind, though I had pretty well determined on a curricle too. But I chanced to meet him on Magdalen Bridge, as he was driving into Oxford last term. "Ah, Thorpe," said he, "do you happen to want such a little thing as this? It is a capital one of the kind, but I am cursed tired of it." "Oh, said I, "I'm your man. What do you ask?" "And how much do you think he did, Miss Morland?" Scrolling down. "I'm sure I cannot guess at all. Curricle, hang you, see? Seat, trunk, sword case, splashing board, lamps, silver moulding, all you see complete, the ironwork as good as new, or better." He asked for 15 guineas. Guineas is just a currency of money. I closed with him directly, threw down the money, and the carriage was mine. "And I'm sure," said Catherine, "I know so little of such things that I could not judge whether it was cheap or dear." "Neither one nor the other. I might have got it for less, I dare say, but I hate haggling, and poor Freeman wanted cash." "That was very good-natured of you," said Catherine, quite pleased. "Oh, when one has the means of doing a kind thing by the friend, I hate to be pitiful." An inquiry now took place into the intended movements of the young ladies, and on finding whither they were going, it was decided that the gentlemen should accompany them to Edgar Buildings, and pay their respects to Mrs. Thorpe. James and Isabella led the way, and so well satisfied was the latter with her lot, so contentedly was she endeavoring to ensure pleasure walk to him, who brought the double recommendation of being her brother's friend and her friend's brother. So pure and uncoquettish were her feelings, that though they overtook and passed the 2 offending young men in Wilson Street, she was far from seeking to attract their notice, that she looked back at them only 3 times. John Thorpe kept of course with Catherine, and after a few minutes' silence, renewed the conversation about his gig. You would find, however, Miss Morland, it would be reckoned a cheap thing by some people, for I have sold it for 10 guineas more the next day. Jackson of Oriel bid me 60 at once. Morland was with me at this time. Yes, said Morland, who overheard this, but you forget that your horse was included. My horse? Oh, it! I would not sell my horse for 100. Are you fond of an open carriage, Miss Morland? Yes, very. I have hardly ever an opportunity of being on one, though, but I'm particularly fond of it. I'm glad of it. I will drive you out in mine every day. Thank you, said Catherine, in some distress, from a doubt of the propriety of accepting such an offer. I will drive you up Lansdowne Hill tomorrow. Thank you, but will not your horse want rest? Rest? He has only come 23 miles today. Oh, nonsense. Nothing ruins horses so much as rest. Nothing knocks them up so soon. No, no. I shall exercise mine at the average of 4 hours every day while I am here. Shall you indeed? Said Catherine, very seriously. That'll be 40 miles a day. 40? Aye, 50 for what I care. Well, I will drive you up Lansdowne tomorrow. Mind, I am engaged. How delightful that will be, cried Isabella, turning around. My dearest Catherine, I quite envy you, but I am afraid, brother, you will not have room for a third. A third, indeed? No, I did not come to Bath to drive my sisters about. That would be a good joke, faith. Morland must take care of you. This brought on a dialogue of civilities between the other two. Catherine heard neither the particulars nor the result. Her companion's discourse now sunk from its hitherto animated pitch to nothing more than a short decisive sentence of praise or condemnation on the face of every woman they met, and Catherine, after listening and agreeing as long as she could, with all the civility and deference of the youthful female mind, fearful of hazarding an opinion of its own in opposition to that of a self-assured man, especially where the beauty of her own sex is concerned, ventured at length to vary the subject by question, which had been long uppermost in her thoughts. It was, Have you ever read Udolpho, Mr. Thorpe? Udolpho? Oh, Lord, not I. I never read novels. I have something else to do. Catherine, humbled and ashamed, was going to apologize for a question, but he prevented her by saying, Novels are so full of nonsense and stuff. There has not been a tolerably decent one coming out since Tom Jones, except for The Monk. I read that the other day. As for all the others, they are the stupidest things in creation. I think you must like Udolpho if you were to read it. It is so very interesting. Not I, Faith. Not if I read any. It will be Mrs. Radcliffe's. Her novels are amusing enough. They are worth reading. Some fun and nature in them. Udolpho was written by Mrs. Radcliffe, said Catherine, with some hesitation for the fear of mortifying him. No, sure was it? Aye, I remember. So it was. I was thinking of that other stupid book, written by that woman they made such a fuss about, she who married the French emigrant. I suppose you mean Camilla? Yes, that's the book. Such a natural stuff. An old man playing at a seesaw? I took up the first volume once and looked it over, but as soon as I found out it would not do, indeed, I guessed what sort of stuff it must be before I saw it. As soon as I heard she had married an emigrant, I was sure I should never be able to get through it. I have never read it. You had no loss, I assured you. It is the horridest nonsense you could imagine. There is nothing in the world but an old man's playing at a seesaw and learning Latin. Upon my soul, there is not. This critique, the justness of which was unfortunately lost on poor Catherine, brought them to the door of Mrs. Thorpe's lodgings, and the feelings of the discerning and unprejudiced reader of Camilla gave way to the feelings of the dutiful and affectionate son. As they met Mrs. Thorpe, who had descried them from above in the passage, "Ah, mother, how do you do?" said he, giving her a hearty shake of the hand. "Where did you get that quiz of a hat? Makes you look like you had You look like an old witch. Here's Miss Morland, and I come to stay a few days with you, so you must look out for a couple of good beds somewhere near." And the satirist seemed to satisfy all the fondest wishes of the mother's heart, for she received them with the most delighted and exulting affection. On his two younger sisters he bestowed them an equal portion of his fraternal tenderness, for he asked each of them how they did, and observed that they both looked very ugly. These manners did not please Catherine, but he was James's friend and Isabella's brother, and her judgment was further bought off by Isabella assuring her, when they withdrew to see the new hat, that John thought her the most charming girl in the world, and by John's engaging her before they parted to dance with him that evening. Had she been older or vainer, such attacks might have done little, but where youth and diffidence are united, it requires uncommon steadiness of reason to resist the attraction of being called the most charming girl in the world, and of being so very early engaged as a partner, and the consequence was that when the two Morlands, after sitting an hour with the Thorpes, set off to walk together to Mr. Allen's, and James, as the door was closed on them, said, "Well, Catherine, how do you like my friend Thorpe?" Instead of answering, as she probably would have done, had there been no friendship and no flattery in the case, she directly replied, "I like him very much. He seems very agreeable. He is as good-natured a fellow as ever lived, a little of a rattle, but that will recommend him to your sex, I believe. And how do you like the rest of the family?" "Very, very much indeed." "Isabella particularly?" "I'm very glad to hear you say so. She is just the kind of young woman I could wish to see you attracted to. She has so much good sense, and is so thoroughly unaffected and amiable. I have always wanted you to know her, and she seems very fond of you. She said the highest things in your praise that could possibly be, and the praise of such a girl as Miss Thorpe, even you, Catherine, taking her hand in affection, may be proud of." "Indeed I am," she replied. "I love her exceedingly, and am delighted to find that you like her too. You hardly mentioned anything of her when you wrote to me after your visit there, because I thought you should soon see her yourself. I hope you will do a great deal together while you are in Bath. She is a most amiable girl, such a superior understanding. How fond all the family are of her! She is evidently the general favorite, and how much she is admired in such a place as this, is not she?" Yes, very much indeed, I fancy." "Mr. Allen thinks her as the prettiest girl in Bath." "I dare say she does, and I do not know any man who is a better judge of beauty than Mr. Allen. I need not ask you whether you are happy here, my dear Catherine, such a companion and friend as Isabella Thorpe, and it would be impossible for you to be otherwise, and the Allens, I am sure, are very kind to you." "Yes, very kind. I never was so happy before, and now you are come, it will be more delightful than ever. How good it is for you to come so far on the purpose just to see me." James accepted this tribute of gratitude, and qualified his conscience by accepting it too, by saying with perfect sincerity, "Indeed, Catherine, I love you dearly." Inquiries and communications concerning brothers and sisters, the situation of some, the growth of the rest, and other family matters, now passed between them, and continued, with only one small digression on James's part, in praise of Miss Thorpe, till they reached Pulteney Street, where he was welcomed with the great kindness of Mr. and Mrs. Allen, invited by the former to dine with them, and summoned by the latter to guess the price and weight, the merits of a new muff and tippet. A pre-engagement in Edgar's Buildings prevented his accepting the invitation of one friend, and obliged him to hurry away as soon as he had satisfied the demands of another. The time of the two parties uniting in the octagon room being correctly adjusted, Catherine was then left to the luxury of her raised, restless, and frightened imagination over the pages of Udolpho, lost from all worldly concerns of dressing and dinner, and capable of soothing Mrs. Allen's fears on the delay of an unexpected dressma, having only 1 minute and 60 to even... line, even on the reflection of her own felicity, being already engaged for the evening. Okay, we're done with chapters 6 and 7, and we'll continue next time. Thank you so much for listening. I know that was wrong, but thank you, and bye.